If you ever tried to buy a house and felt lost, welcome to Mortgage Support. Today I'm answering real world questions that people send me every single day. We're gonna be covering topics like refinancing. So that's like the $1 million question because rates are coming down finally. So when should I refinance? How should I do it? What's the best smart way to do it? As well as I'm gonna be sharing some sneaky scams that are coming around with lenders. So that way you can be on the lookout for that and be a smart refinancer. Second question we're gonna be talking about is the infamous closing costs. How much should I expect to save? What are some rules of thumbs? As well as what should I expect to pay out of pocket basically before closing and then at closing as well. So stick around for that. Like I mentioned, let's talk about refinancing because rates are coming down. Everyone's gonna be talking about this very shortly. When, how should I do it? So I'm gonna share those rules of thumbs as well as these sneaky scams these lenders are doing. So I'm gonna teach you these so that way you don't fall for it. Okay, so hi Nathan, how are you? I got this letter and I'm not quite sure what to make of it because people are sending all this spam mail right now. Do you have any insights? I know you aren't with blah, 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 but I obviously like working with you and getting your perspective. Thanks. Okay, so past client of mine, sent me a text message about a letter that they got in the mail. And I'm gonna kind of like highlight a few things. Obviously we redacted any personal information from this, but they got this around like August 28th, 2025, talking about benefits of your Federal Housing Administration or FHA loan. When I see a letter like this, these are some things to, I would say, be mindful of, okay? When clients send me like documents like this and stuff like that, and they get these awesome like cash disbursement of $88,369.74, think of that almost like as a little hook. Immediately, anytime there's like cash, money, disbursement, free, blah, 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 skip mortgage payments and free money, I would highly question like, why, what am I reading? And then the other thing is like, think about it logically too. If they were offering this $88,369 disbursement and they're awesome, you'll notice that there's no like logo on this letter. But like I said, why is there no company logo that is like plastered all over this? Because if their sandwich was that good, I would be bragging all about my sandwich, okay? The toast was perfect, the butter is great, all over the place. But you'll notice there's nothing there, okay? So like, just think about that. If it was that good, where is their logo? Why is there like a small call 8500-55, whatever, blah, 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 right? There's also, they're listing all of these benefits of like cash disbursement, debt consolidation, lower monthly payment, discounted interest rates, escrow refund, and remove mortgage insurance premiums. Now, they just threw out all these crazy terms, but the thing is, if you do the cash disbursement, you could do the debt consolidation, but lowering the payments will be very rare, I would say. And discounted interest rates, usually if you're doing a cash out, you're not gonna get discounted interest rates because there's gonna be a risk premium added on top of that, depending on the product, by the way, but generally speaking, right? So it's like almost they're like grouping these together and remove mortgage insurance premiums. That's only if you switch from an FHA loan to a conventional loan, right? And then on top of it, I know this client's specific scenarios, like they don't have enough equity to even do this cash out. But what's kind of misleading is they throw out these terms of removing mortgage insurance and doing this cash out, which they more than likely can't even do that because of how recent they bought the place, right? But anyways, they also say you may have no mortgage payment up for, and they also say you may not have mortgage payments due for up to 2 months while we process this request. You may also reduce or eliminate your mortgage, $348 of mortgage insurance payment, right? Yes, you may not have 2 mortgage payments, but it's gonna be tacked on at the end of your mortgage. So you wanna use that wisely, right? So it's never like it's skipped. I reframe it from skipped or free, no mortgage payments to deferred mortgage payments. You bought January 2020, and then you're gonna be paying this off in December 2049, if I'm doing this correctly. 360 payments, if this was the first payment. So payment 1 all the way to there. So it should end right before January. So it's not like if you're gonna refinance right here and it says skipped, still close right here. If you refinance right here and you do another 30-year fixed payment, you're gonna be paying this off at like December 2055, right? So it's not skipped, it's just deferred. And also if you redo your 30-year mortgage. So you wanna make sure it's smart to refinance too. So whenever like a client reaches out like, hey, I want your insight, what do you think? I just give general rules of thumbs. And if they want to talk in a larger capacity, you know, just like, hey, thumbs up this video, and we can discuss in more detail. But that's what I always do first. I never like give out these crazy claims or anything like that because it's misleading and you're kind of setting yourself up for success or failure, excuse me, by saying these crazy numbers. So first and foremost, since you guys are watching this far into it, I'm gonna lay out some secrets, okay? If you're in the first 5 years, so here's like pro tip number one, pro tip, first 5 years of your mortgage. So why 5 years? Is because the way principal and interest works is you're gonna pay more interest in the beginning. And also like this, so like let's imagine this is like 2025 right now. You pay a lot of interest these first 5 years. So it's almost like running uphill. No one likes running uphill. Oh gosh, you're running uphill the first 5 years, okay? More like 10 years, but five to 10 years, okay? You're running uphill the first 5 to 10 years. And then here's kind of like 20-ish years downhill. You're gonna be paying more principal, meaning gaining more equity every single mortgage payment, like an awesome amount. So first 5 to 10 years, you're running uphill. So if you're doing 5 years into it, and then you reset your whole 30 years again, you pay it 5 years later, you're gonna be resetting your mortgage payment. So I always recommend 0.5% to 1% minimum, like minimum, just to make sure it makes sense, okay? If it's below this, like 0.25%, we better have a really good reason as to why we're doing this. And if you're like in a sticky situation, like with credit card debt, stuff like that, it may make sense. But if you're like, Nathan, I'm watching this video, I got perfect credit, no debt, minimum 0.5% to 1%, that's what you wanna be looking at first 5 years. If you're over 1%, that's amazing. Depending on your purchase price. If you're like at $100,000 purchase price or 200,000, 300,000, maybe you may want a little bit more than that, but this is a good rule of thumb. If you're like at a $500,000 purchase price or mortgage payment, loan amount, $1 million, this is gonna be kind of like a no-brainer, especially if it's in like the first year or two. So yeah, that's my first rule of thumb, okay? Pro tip, first 5 years, 0.5% to 1% minimum before you even like do any calculations. If you're not there, don't waste your time. Next is gonna be, hey, I'm gonna be restarting my 25, 30 years and I'm paying it off 5 years later. Can you do a custom mortgage? Okay, meaning custom mortgage, can I still pay off the mortgage exactly on 2049? Okay, so that way you don't restart your uphill battle. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of clients that are like falling for this trap where they're 2 years into it, a year into it, stuff like that, and they'll restart their 30 year because they just want to have that extra $50 a month in payments, which is totally fine. But just be mindful, like you're signing up for that. And when you go sell the house or pay the house off or something like that, you might have less equity than what you expected because of this resetting of this uphill run. It's like one of those sacrifices you make up front for the long-term future. But if you're like, hey, I just got to get out of this, debt trap and I need some breathing room right now, maybe you can do an extension like this, right? But if you're like, hey, I'm rock solid and I just want to, be mortgage free as soon as I reasonably can, then do a custom mortgage so that way you end on the original purchase date, okay? That's something that I usually like to recommend. Next thing I want to talk about is timelines. Like I get this all the time. When can I refinance from a timing perspective? Usually 6 months is kind of like my rule of thumb because you're gonna have some closing costs that happened at purchase. And then when you do close on the refinance, it should be a lot less, by the way. If your closing cost is not a lot less than when you purchased, probably a who problem. Find a better person. Your refinance closing costs should be a lot less. Plus, we could get a little creative, like it's not skip payments, but deferred mortgage payments, where you would make one original mortgage payment. Maybe you pay that to the closing costs and then you keep the other, pay it forward and pay down the loan. That's pretty advanced, but usually 6 months timeline to a year is kind of like the minimum I would look at before and this. So it's almost like this condition satisfied and this satisfied, probably explore in more detail. It doesn't mean do it for sure 100%. It just means move it to the next milestone and explore in more detail. If you're like at 2 months and it had a 0.5% drop, that's pretty rare, but maybe wait a little bit longer so that way you might land kind of like in here, okay? If you're past the 6 months or even a year and also 0.5%, 1%, let's move it to the next step, okay? Also, if you're a first-time home buyer, you're trying to figure out, how do I figure out my comfortable mortgage payment. I actually developed something called a homeownership free trial. Trademark pending, by the way, wherever it is. I spent a lot of time creating this to keep it simple, but yet effective. There's a free guide down below where you can kind of test drive your mortgage payment without actually owning a house, just using your rent and a high yield savings account. And there's some pro tips in there. So make sure to grab that guide down below. Hey Nathan, quick question. How do the costs in Texas work, like realtor fees, inspection, earnest money deposit basically, and the option fee? Do those get rolled into closing or are they paid separately? All right, so that's gonna be upfront and then at closing, okay? Okay, great. So let's talk about that. So upfront wise, typically what's gonna happen, and I'm gonna share some rules of thumbs too. Okay, so let's say you're right here. Should we do a happy face with closing costs or kind of like a semi-smiley face? Because you're gonna be buying a house, right? Okay, so upfront wise, that's typically gonna be your EMD, which is your earnest money deposit, okay? So that's basically, usually it's like 1% to 3% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $100,000 house, that's $1,000. If you're buying 500,000, that's 5,000. But the real estate agent's gonna figure out what's the best approach for your EMD or earnest money deposit, because it's gonna be based on how aggressive you wanna make the offer, because the higher your deposit, the more attractive it looks to the seller. So like, for example, what's gonna happen with EMD is like you get your offer accepted, the seller's gonna take it off the market. And if for some reason something happens and the deal blows up, give that deposit to the sellers, assuming you're past your real estate contingencies or your real estate parachutes. But that's a little outside the scope of this. But basically the higher the earnest money deposit, the better your offer will look. So if you had the same exact offer, let's say the house is 500K and 500K, and you have a 3% deposit and the other person has a 1% earnest money deposit, you're pretty much gonna win the offer, assuming both real estate agents are good, okay? So that's usually 1 to 3%. Technically, you can do whatever you want. These are just the norms, industry norms. So you can, like, I remember way back in the day, I had like one where it was like a VA client, a veteran. They were doing 0% down and they wanted to come in with like as little out of pocket as possible. So their deposit was like, I think it was like $1 or like $100, which is very, very low. Again, it was more of a buyer's market way back in the day compared to like COVID. And right now it's more of a buyer's market right now, but not like that crazy of a buyer's market. Getting away with $100 earnest money deposit. I haven't seen that in a while, but you can do whatever you want. So your real estate agent's gonna recommend something, but usually it's 1 to 3%, okay? Then what's gonna be upfront is usually your inspection. Inspection. Okay, I would say that could be anywhere from $300 to like $800, depending on how many types of specialties you want. So like $300 usually generic stuff. And then if you want to have like foundation checked, like with the actual specialist, your sewer scope, definitely do that, by the way, because you never want to have roots in your plumbing and then you didn't find out until later. So usually if you're getting all the bells and whistles, like the inspector is going to give you a general assessment, right? Then you're going to spend a little bit more money to have like specific people come out. And that's why I'm saying $300 to $800. The norm that I've seen is probably like $400 or $500, okay? So that's your inspection. That is upfront. Then there is going to be an appraisal if you need one per the lender. Now, although you may not have an appraisal, the lender may have an appraisal, right? If you're a VA client, this doesn't get paid upfront, so exception is not for VA for appraisal. But usually that's going to be, I would say, $400 to $700, right around there, for an appraiser that checks the home value. So inspector will check the health, wellness, and safety of the house. Appraiser is going to check the value of the house, okay? Usually that's out of pocket. And then in Texas specifically, some other states too, you're going to have what's called an option period. Option, just fancy word for I'm doing my due diligence during this period. It's basically, usually this is like $100 to $500. The higher this is, the better. Basically, this is semi not refundable. Basically, it's costing you this to put an offer in. I'm just trying to keep things simple here. Your earnest money deposit will be protected if you have like what I call your real estate parachutes. But this is basically, hey, I'm trying to put an offer in, stuff like that. So here's $100 to $500 for the work, I should say. And then in California, which is where most of my clients are, but California, you don't have an option. So basically it's like free to write an offer. But in Texas, you do have to put some money there. So those are usually the upfront costs. If you're in an HOA, you might have HOA documents. So please be mindful of this. This is something that a lot of first-time home buyers don't know. This could be, this could range from $100. This could be like $600, depending on like how many documents you need for the lender and how much you need for yourself for due diligence. So again, it can definitely add up. So what I always recommend for clients is like, hey, be prepared for some upfront out-of-pocket expenses. So you wanna make sure you kind of like the house, right? If you don't like the house at all, not worth putting an offer in and not worth spending this. But if you're like, I kind of like this house and I want to do more due diligence, your deposit should be protected, so that's kind of refundable. This item usually isn't. This item could be refundable if you time it where you get the inspection done and you know you're not moving forward, you cancel this before they actually go out. So this could be kind of refundable. This one usually isn't. This one isn't, usually not. And this one usually isn't as well. So just be mindful of that. Okay, so if you want to do the math, you can kind of do worst case scenario. If you're in a higher price point market, try to do worst case scenario. But if you're like in a lower price point market, I would say like kind of like in the 100 to 300,000 price range, maybe kind of use in the middle or the lower tier. And then if you're in the higher price point markets like Southern California, Bay Area, you may want to look at the higher price points there. Okay, so that's upfront. All right, now let's actually go to closing costs. I know this is a long-winded answer, but closing costs, this depends on so many things. Lender, okay? Realtor now, right? Like who's paying for realtor costs? Sellers, who are the sellers? Because guess what? Usually the sellers are gonna choose your title and escrow company. Let me get this a little more wet. So the sellers will usually choose the title and escrow company, which changes your closing costs. So if you're talking to a mortgage person, they have no idea who the title and escrow company is until you get the offer accepted. What I like to do, overestimate, especially when you're like trying to crunch the numbers. Like, what do you have to lose if you overestimate, right? If you underestimate, you have a lot to lose. You could be like, oh, I wasn't budgeting this amount of money, and it's like, whoa, I have a $5,000 extra cost. That's pretty much called a bait and switch, right? So I would always overestimate, especially in the due diligence stage. Doesn't hurt you at all, okay? Worst case, you got some more money left over, right? So title, escrow, insurance. Who is the insurance company? If you're in California, with the LA fires, insurance has been more difficult to get. So this could range, especially if you're in a fire zone, quite a bit. That could be a $2,000 to $5,000 swing if you need specialty insurance, right? Guess what? Day of closing, because there's what's called prepaid interest and proration of property taxes, all these fancy words. And then month of closing. Month of closing, what? Because if you think about it, for property taxes, like imagine this, you have the sellers, you have tax, like day 0, day 365, and you buy right here, your house, you have taxes that have been paid for by the sellers, right? You're gonna be moving in like right over here. So like if you pay for the taxes, do the sellers credit you or do they debit you, right? So all this confusing stuff. So lots of different variables when it depends to closing costs. So here's what I recommend, is this kind of like spectrum, okay? So I'm gonna do 100K in purchase price, and then I'm going to do about, right here, let's do 1 million purchase price, okay? And then let's do 500K. I would use a range because you're gonna look online and they're gonna give you, okay, closing costs is gonna be 2 to 5%, maybe 2 to 4%. In closing costs, but what I would actually tie that to is the purchase price range. So if you're gonna be at 100,000, I would actually estimate maybe 5% for closing costs and then 2% right over here for closing costs. So it's gonna be swapped instead of 2 to 5%. Don't do 2% here. It's not $2,000, I can promise you that. Because an inspection at $500 for a $100,000 house and $500,000 house is pretty much the same. Percentage-wise, massive difference. So do 5%. And here I would do kind of like, if you want to be on the conservative side, do 3.5, but I would do 3% here, okay? Maybe 3 to 3.5% here of the purchase price. Now, if you're above this range, that's where I would ask your mortgage advisors, like, hey, based on this range, and I kind of know a little bit about closing costs, why is my closing cost 4%? It may be because your insurance is high, or the day of closing, or the month of closing. You have an HOA fee here, right? Or maybe you're buying a multi-unit, so it's a little bit more than the $700, right? So use this grade just to kind of get you a rough estimate. If you want to get extra bonus points, so this is like your recommendation, but if you want to be conservative, just do +1, +1, +1, okay? Worst case, you have some extra money left over. And as always, I try to make the best videos in the mortgage education space. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment what you want to watch next. And if you're curious, how do I pay off this mortgage faster? Because my plan is, like I mentioned, I want to, refinance, lower the payment, pay off the mortgage faster. I actually just created a video of how to pay off your mortgage in simple steps. Like if you do $100, $300, or $500, how do I pay off the mortgage? Even though when I bought the house, I'm not comfortable paying extra, but in the future I may. So if you're interested, give this video a click right over here. That's a simple mortgage payoff plan. So click that video and I'll see you there. I'll catch you on the next one.